I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One thing I'd like to mention before we start the program is that we now have to register when we come to the senior center as visitors. You come in and they'll have that all set up. So you just come in and you register. If you have not filled out one of these forms, you can get them
Right here.
right up here and fill them out. I've done this. This is my second fill out. So sometimes there's a little mix up along the way. But hopefully this will get it done.
If you're already a member of the senior center, you still have to fill out.
Yeah,
Yes.
you gotta get
One
a
time.
card. We're not gonna check in at
Fill it
the
out one time.
Yes.
Maloney's anymore. You're gonna have a card to go to the computer and just flash the card.
The next order of business is I'd like to introduce Bill Winters, who is going to be serving as our vice moderator. He will be helping out with programs and with trips. And I want to tell you, I really welcome him here. It's been very lonely up here at the front desk for the last 2 or 3 years, it seems. So I'd like to introduce Bill, and Bill's going to tell us a little bit about himself and his background. Bill.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bruce. It's really my pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Bruce for this opportunity to be up here. People have a really difficult time selling me on anything, but Bruce sold me on this position, and he told me how wonderful and exciting it would be to be up here and work with the men's club. And already I've worked with Dean, I've worked with Burke already, and it has been a lot of fun. And I look really forward to working with everybody else here in the club on planning our meetings and speakers for the future. A little bit about myself is my philosophy on life is that it takes 80 billion miracles a second for us to be here talking to one another. And so we want to make every second count of our lives.
Great.
I moved here to the Cape in 1985 from San Francisco. I grew up in Mattapan, just a little bit south of Boston. And I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but I remember that as a little kid, the excitement in the neighborhood was when the bigger kids would steal cars and they'd have drag races up and down the dirt roads in the woods behind my house. Sometimes the cops would chase them, sometimes they wouldn't. But then when they were finished, they'd set the cars on fire. And so the excitement for us little kids was to watch the gas tanks explode. So that was the excitement for me growing up in Mattapan. We moved to Canton when I was 14, and I graduated from Worcester Polytech with the bachelor's in civil engineering. And then I got a graduate degree at Cornell in geotechnical engineering.
Not a bad school. Cornell,
Not-
not a bad school.
Not a bad school. And that allowed me to study the most exciting thing on the face of the earth. Most exciting thing is mud from the bottom of the ocean. And that allowed me to be on projects where we were gravity coring in the Gulf of Maine, to piston coring in the Gulf of Mexico, to vibra coring up in the Gulf of Alaska. I was able to be on projects up in the Canadian Arctic above the Arctic Circle in the middle of the winter when it was 40 below zero, trying to not get eaten by a polar bear. And was also on the North Slope of Alaska. And sometimes I was able to be on a drill ship off the east coast of the U.S. Off of India. So I was able to really have a wonderful professional life in the field, always trying to not get seasick out there. But when I'd be back on land, it was even more exciting because I ran a laboratory where we used high pressure, flammable, explosive methane gas. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for months at a time. And I want to say that every day that we finished up our studies, we would say, regardless of how the experiment went, if we didn't blow up the building, it was a good day. It was a good
Well, you
day.
had the experience with cars, so, you know, all
There we
good.
go. So I want to say one other thing that had a profound effect on my life, and that was my dad, who grew up during the Great Depression, and he would see all the toys that my daughter had growing up, and he would say, "Boy, I felt lucky if I had a ball and a stick growing up." So he had a philosophy on life that stuck with me, and his work ethic is what got transferred over to me also. And during World War II, he went in as a buck private, became a corporal, training troops up at Camp Edwards, and then he landed at Normandy as a demolitions expert, was put into George Patton's Third Army after being in the amphibious forces. And the thing I just want to mention, the thing that affects me today, is that you know those really cold winter days here on the Cape that can be brutally cold and damp? Well, I start to complain and say, "Boy, it's really cold." And I think, wait a minute, you get to open up a door and walk into a nice, warm house. And I think about the troops in 1944 that were in the coldest winter in 30 to 40 years, and what was their house was a hole in the ground. So I'm so grateful to be able to, every single day, walk into a nice, warm house. And that brings me to the next and final point, which is I want to thank everyone in the audience, men and women, who have served in the armed forces, who are veterans. We owe you all so much, and I want to thank you so much for serving. And I think that's about the extent of my life. You probably know more about me than my wife does now.
Great job, great job. Yes, yes. We look forward to working with you and your contributions. By the way, what about the mud? You worked at mud all those years?
I worked with mud all those years.
What can you tell us about mud?
Mud, the reason mud is so exciting, think about this. The reason mud is so exciting, even, you don't have to go to the bottom of the ocean, just the mud in your backyard. There is nothing that we come in contact with in our daily lives that has such a wide range of engineering properties. Under some circumstances, it can flow like water, and in other circumstances, it can be as hard as concrete. And so to go ahead and try to measure those properties and predict what it will do is what is so exciting.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. So think about the mud in your backyard or the dirt in your backyard when you go home.
Great comments, especially as we're getting into Veterans Day and all, very appropriate about your father serving in the service. My uncle also was part of the General Patton's army as well. He was wounded and became a paraplegic all his life, standing up against a tank. A sniper, I guess it was a sniper, shot a bullet. It just nicked his elbow, went into his back. If it hadn't been for his elbow, he probably would have been. He probably might have been dead. So that meant a lot to me to hear that story as well too. Okay, we're going to move on. Our treasurer is going to report. He's handing money. That's nice. Our treasurer, Harvey.
This isn't mud.
Okay, I hope not.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stay seated because I had a little accident a few weeks ago and I have a blood clot in my leg, so I can't stand too long. So I apologize for staying seated. But anyway, and I also apologize that I left the treasurer's report home this morning. But through the miracle of the modern age, and because I make a report to Burke in advance, I can kind of go up to what I sent him the other day, and I can read you the report directly from my telephone. Amazing what you can do these days. As soon as I can find it. I got it right here, okay. Okay, so not a very exciting report, not nearly as exciting as
So
mud.
far,
Not nearly as exciting as mud, but we'll give it a try anyway. We started the month, We started the month with $1,879 in the treasury. During the month, we collected $12 from the 50/50 raffle, $5 from the sale of coffee, $60 for dues, for a total of $77. And during the month, we wrote $1,100 in checks for contributions that we're making to various sundry organizations that Burke can explain. And as a result of the $77 income and the $1,100 expenditure, our balance has reduced to a resounding $856.18, if you want me to be precise. That's the report.
Thank you very, very much. That's going, my checkbook is going in the same direction these days, down, down, down.
Is it everybody's? And wait till we pay our utility bills.
Yes, yes. Berkeley, you're on.
Okay, the secretary's report. The minutes were distributed with the newsletter after the last meeting. Is there anybody who has some corrections, additions, subtractions, or whatever? Otherwise, could we have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, secondly, Dean, well, I'll leave that for a minute. I do have the checks for the charities. There's six charities plus the $500 we give to the senior center for, in the form of $50 Stop and Shop gift cards that they distribute to needy members of the senior center. Let's see, what else I've got here. We're all set now for the holiday luncheon. I will send the board around again, but we have enough in hand for the members who have signed up and to cover the 13 guests we have from the high school who will be joining us. That's the High Fives on December 6th. So if we could send that around, and anybody who hasn't signed up, don't check the column numbers with the money right now, but just the names and how many will attend.
How many have signed up thus far, Men's Club members?
I'd have to count them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're-
I withdraw the question.
We're in the mid-20s, somewhere with that, and 13 from the high school. I would like to say that we're pleased to have Alex Megerly, is that how it's pronounced, Alex, from the Mashpee Enterprise. We've tried to start publishing some very interesting articles on upcoming programs that we have, upcoming speakers, and they've been pretty good to us, and they've sent Alex to us today, in part because of our speaker, who's well-known and certainly should be, to have a place in the upcoming edition.
This is going to be a great story. Take a profile for him, for this guy's background and all. Yes.
The
New vice moderator. Yes.
Jumping around a little bit, the High Five Lunch, as you, I believe, know from recent messages, is going to be at Buck Antonio's restaurant out at the end of Route 151 rather than at the Daniel Webster Inn. That was basically a financial decision we made when the signups were lagging. They've come through now. I think we're going to have a good social occasion for that holiday luncheon. And I will say that Jim Clark and I have been in touch with the high school and attended the mock interview session that they had a week or so ago. Each of us interviewed 4 students in the senior class, hopefully to give them an idea of what it's like to be interviewed when they apply for a job or whatever, as they go on with their college and careers. And they were a lively bunch. I think we'll see, first two women that, young women that showed up for my guidance, such as it was, were number 3 in the class and number 4 in the class. And I think we'll see them at the
Again.
high
You
fives.
see them again, that's right. You see them again, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
maybe also the
Very,
Boys and Girls Club,
very
too.
exciting. Let's see, we have some other things coming up. The high school is delighted that we're getting involved with more than just the High Five program. We've been invited again or at least to renew our visits to the high school for tours and a lunch. And that's a February event. It'll be on February 28th, and there'll be plenty of notice about it beforehand. We've been asked by one of the teachers to join a worldwide mapping business that her mapping club is involved with, and that's going to be in January or February. And then relating to senior projects, exhibition night is in April. We haven't got the exact date yet, but then some of us will sign up to evaluate senior projects in May when the kids make their actual presentation of them. So anybody who's interested in some of those activities with the high school, please be in touch with me. There'll be stuff in the newsletter about that. And I think that's all. I wanted to ask Dean if he's going to say something about our
Our speaker, yes, yes.
no, our visit to the
Sorry.
Maritime.
He's gonna do both, yes.
That and the upcoming trip to the Coast Guard station. Do you want to do it now?
Sure.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah. Maybe you're gonna mention the Mass Maritime thing too?
Sure.
Good morning, can you hear me? Yes. Just want to remind people that on, our next trip is November 17th, and we're gonna go to the US Coast Guard Station in Woods Hole, and the tour is gonna have 3 sections. The Sector Command Center, where they'll give a demonstration of search and rescue process that's for southeast New England, starting with when they receive the distress call, and show how the various assets are deployed, and search patterns are implemented. Then we're gonna visit the adjacent small boat, Woods Hole Station, and then finally, based on whether the boat is available, we're gonna get to climb aboard a 110 Island-class patrol boat that's right there stationed at Woods Hole. And after that tour, which is gonna be from like 10 to 11:30, then we're gonna go to Landfall Restaurant for lunch, where we'll order out the menu and take Right now, we're at a junction point, go, no go. We have 10 people signed up. We've got room for another 10 if there are those many more interested. I'd like to hand it around, pass the sign-up sheet around, and ask you to sign if you are not aboard yet. We didn't have a rain date for Mass Maritime, and we shifted it back and forth, and part of the reason we lost people by shifting it and came back to the original date is because we hadn't announced the rain date in advance. So the rain date for this, November 17th, if it's a great day, we won't use it, obviously, but if it isn't, the 18th of November, the next day will be the rain date, okay? So if you're interested, please sign aboard. We can certainly use drivers that would be able to take others as riders.
Give him the board.
That's okay. It's already,
You think it's strong enough?
yeah, it should be, yeah. There we go. Okay, thank you. Any questions on 17? Good? No? Good. And you want to mention the Mass Maritime,
Well, you could say something briefly, say a few words about that,
okay?
and then introduce our speaker. Sure. If you want to say something about the Maritime?
Oh, okay, well, I'll take it, I gave you the announcement here on the thank you note for the
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I
there we
don't-
go, right
Oh,
here.
this thing.
Yeah. Those of you that went on, we had 18 people on the Mass Maritime trip last month. And one of the things that we did, they treated us to lunch, and so as a result, everybody that was aboard that trip ended up donating $10. So we got a note last night, I got a letter back from the Vice President of External Affairs, thanking us immensely. Among the long-lasting things that we're grateful for at Mass Maritime is the support of the community, including your organization, the Mashpee Men's Club. Thank you for the gift of $175 to the MMAF fund received on October 19th. It truly makes a big difference. Just wanted to let you know, and it's in the archives for the Men's Club. Pull the switch of characters.
Sorry,
Good.
I forgot that.
You want to introduce me, or you
I
want?
sure do. You tell me when.
Now,
Right now.
Ready? Are we ready? Okay. I had set this up for Al, but he didn't need it, so I'm gonna just read off my sheet here. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, a good friend, Al Benjamin. Al is gonna focus today on one of my two favorite oxymorons, and it's constant change. Al says if you don't like what you're facing now, hang on, it's gonna change. And the other oxymoron that I particularly enjoy is fun work. Most people see the phrase that the two words are too dissimilar. And they say it should be work, and after you've worked, then you have fun. And I don't believe that. I believe that many people have found fun work through their career, and the closer you get to it, the more memorable your career is. But I venture to guess that for our speaker today, Al Benjamin, public speaking is fun work because he does it so playfully and naturally. I want to share a couple of things about Al. He's had Al's life, and it's a mere 98 years. 98 years. Al's life has been loaded with record setting. And I want to share two things that are relevant to today and his talk. One of them is his military career. He was one of the youngest second lieutenant celestial navigators during the Second World War. He was in the 8th Air Force, and he, at the ripe age of 19, led his B-17 bomber crew on 30 missions over Europe. And he will tell you, I'm sure, during the talk today, how one of the missions was significant enough that that's how we won the World War II. Okay? And for those of you that haven't heard it, it's a great story. The second piece that I want to share about Al is in his 30 missions, although he got shot down, at the end of it, he got a Purple Heart and he got several medals. So I would like to just have you join me in saluting Al Benjamin. The second accomplishment, memorable thing that I want to share about Al is at the ripe age of 26, he met his love of his life, Lorraine. And they have been married for 72 years. And so, speaking of records, I'd like to salute Al and Lorraine for a wonderful life together. In fact, I'm hoping that we're going to ask him to come back next year with Lorraine and share the secrets of marital longevity, because I think it'd be fascinating. But today, we want to just sit back now and listen to Al as he spins his yarn that comes directly from his book entitled Change, and how he dealt with the plethora of change he experienced over the last century. Please welcome Al Benjamin.
Well, the first thing I'd like to tell you about is the fact to get along with somebody for 72 or 73 years, all you have to do is say yes. You know, I wrote this book because I didn't write it for publication. I really wrote it to tell the coming generations. I have 4 great-grandchildren, and as they grow up, they're going to have children, and in 100 years from now, nobody will know what happened in our century. And I wrote this not only to remind them of what happened in our century and how our country was formed, but what I did in the century itself, because otherwise it will go unheeded.
The genesis of the book was a culmination of things that I lived through. I'm almost a century old, and I remember almost everything that I wrote about. I'm thankful for the help of Google, Wikipedia to fill out the research and the memory gaps and those changes that happened before I was born, because I write this book at the beginning of the United States. I also included some of my own history, and thoughts will help chronicle my own life for those who want to remember me as part of the greatest generation. Intentionally, the book was not in chronicle order. It is not half-hearted in its construction. I try to make it interesting, to impart knowledge, and to drive home the fact that everything is a state of flux. Change is inevitable and happens at its own pace. As I write and talk to people about what I was doing, new remembrances came to the forefront, and I inserted them in the book where I thought they would be interesting. There is a saying in New England, if you do not like the weather of the moment, just wait a minute and change will happen. This is how I view the world. Just wait and things are going to change. It does not matter what you want, change will happen. Usually for the best, sometimes not so much. Change is inevitable. Change is constant. Usually it is for the better. Sometimes it's bothersome and irrelevant, and other times it's a marvelous jump forward for the betterment of society. The biggest change came when a ragtag group of patriots waged a war against the great empire of Great Britain, the most powerful country in the world at the time. The American patriots lost almost every skirmish except the last one, but the English had seen enough and gave up, and there was a large change. Self-government was born. The world had come to accept democracy as the greatest change. Just think, at the beginning of our country in 1775, we traveled by a horse-drawn coach, or if we were of the gentry, we also had a horse to ride. We lit our homes with homemade candles. We burned wood in the fireplace for heat. Most people in America were farmers and lived a meager existence. The woman of the house sewed all of the clothing, planted and tended the garden, canned the produce for future use. With cleaning the house, doing the laundry, and raising the children, her day was filled even though she awakened at dawn. Most of the civilized world led an agrarian life with few comforts. The rich among us had many fine homes made of brick and lumber, but mainly people lived in wooden houses and log cabins, very substandard as we look at it today. There were craftsmen of all kinds, men who worked with their hands, blacksmiths, carpenters, millers, coopers, gunsmiths, locksmiths, silversmiths like Paul Revere, and brewers like Sam Adams. And at the turn of the 19th century, America was growing rapidly. The allure of self-government and freedom brought immigrants from England and the rest of Western Europe. Freedom was here. Shipbuilding and world commerce was growing, with New England and the sea captains traveling the world for cloth, spices, and goods of all kinds. Trade was the new economy of the United States. We were trading with England, France, Spain, and the rest of the world. However, England objected to our trading with France during their incessant French-English wars, and the Royal Navy attacked our ships. Political considerations and many treaties with different countries exacerbated the problem. Finally, England declared war in the War of 1812. And in August 1814, the English redcoats proceeded to Washington, D.C., razing the U.S. Capitol. On December 24, 1814, America and Great Britain signed the Treaty of Ghent, ending the war, and they eventually withdrew their forces. American ships could now roam the seas unmolested. In the early part of the 19th century, there was unrest in the United States. Southern states were utilizing slave labor on their cotton plantations, and capturing and selling of African blacks was a thriving business. In the North, most of the citizens looked at this with abhorrence and tried to have the South stop engaging in slavery. The issue of slavery was so important to the commerce of the South that the Southern states decided that they would secede from the Union and become the Confederate States of America. After many skirmishes with the Union forces, the Civil War began. The Civil War, as bloody as it was, became to be a stimulant to advancing medical practice. So even though it was bloody, it did something for the world. The toll on both sides was without precedent, and medicine was forced to adapt to battlefield conditions and invent new techniques that would help save combat lives. The germ theory was starting to be implemented. Ether and chloroform were being used in some battlefield surgery field hospitals to relieve pain. Opium derivatives and cocaine were available. Changes in medicine started in mid-century 1850s and continues through to today. So many changes and such advances that an encyclopedia could be devoted to all of the changes in medicine. Whaling started in the 11th century with wind-driven whalers of many types. In the early 1800s, whaling was a great history in the United States, not only for the ships at sea, but the manufacture of whaling ships. Whaling was a prime industry for northeastern states and primarily a major industry for New England. New Bedford, Massachusetts became the whaling capital of the world, and many a sea captain lived here on Cape Cod and Nantucket. In the latter part of the 19th century, both steam-powered ships and schooners were sailing the seas looking for sperm whales. Also, with the invention of the exploding harpoon, a new change, the vessels were significantly more profitable on each sailing. Whale oil was used for a myriad of uses, among them for the oil lamp. The oil lamp allowed a change from the homemade candles to something that was brighter and easier to manage. This was a great change, but something else was on the horizon that was even better, the gas light. A Scottish engineer experimented with various gases to use as a fuel for his gas light. He eventually settled on coal gas as the cheapest and easiest gas to use. He demonstrated his gas light in the early part of the century to amaze bystanders. Eventually, he outfitted his factory with gas lights and showed how to illuminate public ways. Coal gas was easy to manufacture, and gas works sprang up all over the world in large and small cities. Municipalities and gas companies supplied the gas to homes and businesses through pipes laid in the street with branches into buildings of all sizes. This change allowed working and leisure into the night hours and safe travel on illuminated thoroughfares throughout the city and town. Life was hard, but change was coming. In the middle part of the century, the Industrial Revolution began. Manufacturing was making things that were formerly handmade at home. In England, the James Watt steam engine that was adapted to drive the spinner, which replaced the home spinning wheel. With the advent of a good steam engine, the steam-powered boat made its entry to change the way products could be shipped to markets around the world. In this era, most cities were located along the shores of great rivers. They used the rivers as a method of transporting goods to every area. Where there were no suitable rivers, they dug miles of canals to allow barges to be drawn by horses on each side of the canal. In America, the use of water power began wherever there was a suitable waterfall. Great mills were constructed. In New England, and especially in Lowell, Massachusetts, the water turbine powered the mills that made cloth. This made a large change in the fortunes of the cotton growers in the south of the United States. This, along with the invention, another new change, of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney. This made cotton much cheaper and much more plentiful. Thus, cotton experienced a tenfold growth in demand that exists today by the change to its manufacturing production. At the same time, there was a great change in transportation. No longer were we dependent on horse-drawn vehicles. The steam engine was developed to drive large vehicles with steam power, and the steam railroad was born. At this point in time, communication was carried out by letters that were mailed and sometimes took days to arrive. The Pony Express, as an example. In 1790, Alessandro Volta discovered the elements that could make an electric storage battery. A faster method of communication was needed, so there was another change. Samuel F.B. Morse invented the electric telegraph. This allowed communication over wires to distant destinations. The invention of the battery allowed the Morse telegraph to operate. As a tribute to Volta, we now measure electricity in volts. Morse also invented the Morse code, which is still in use today in various forms. His invention brought forth another change. Communication could be accomplished in minutes by use of the telegraph. Almost immediately, there were commercial companies such as Western Union and Postal Telegraph in the communication business. Telegraphy was necessary to keep the railroads safe and prevent accidents. At the same time that Morse perfected his telegraph, there were two parallel changes in communication. Around 1895, there were a few experimenters in what we now call radio. Among them, there was Guglielmo Marconi, who was recognized as the father of radio. He improved on the work of Alessandro Volta and Andrew Marie Ampere, and George Ohm. Names are synonymous with electricity today. Marconi built a transmission station at Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where he conducted long-distance transmissions. Ships at sea finally had a system to keep communication with the headquarters and other ships. Marconi's radio saved 700 passengers of the Titanic in 1912 when other ships nearby heard their distress signals. During the same period, Alexander Graham Bell was inventing the telephone. Now businesses communicate with each other by phone. This, more than any other thing, contributed to an increase in the gross product of the country. We are now rapidly approaching the 20th century, where change will take place at a dizzying pace. Thomas Alva Edison, called the Wizard of Menlo Park, was born in 1847, and during his lifetime he made a record 1,093 patents. With such changes, the electric incandescent bulb, which changed the way the world would see at night. He invented the phonograph, the motion picture camera, the microphone, the electric generator, and even an electric railroad. His inventions changed the entire world, and we still use them today. Edison's generator produced direct current that had a drawback. It could not be transmitted over long lines, and thus would require many local generating stations to be able to cover a city. George Westinghouse revised the Edison generator and then manufactured an alternating current generator that could transmit electricity over long lines, thus changing the way we generate electricity today. Westinghouse and Edison engaged in the battle of power. They spent huge sums trying to outdo each other in selling their current systems to cities across America. Although Edison had a huge start, Westinghouse is making inroads in many cities. He cut the price of electricity below market. He undercut Edison any way he could. The last straw for Edison was when Westinghouse signed up for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. Despite all the court cases and the infighting, eventually Westinghouse won out, and his alternating electric system became the standard. Incidentally, Nikola Tesla was the engineer who patented alternating current, and he originally worked for Edison. But Edison did not think the Tesla system was practical, and he fired him. Tesla tried a company of his own, but finally he sold his patents to George Westinghouse. The irony in this situation was that Edison's incandescent bulb worked hand in hand with alternating current, used less energy, and seemed to last longer. Now we're in the beginning of the 20th century. The automobile first appeared in Germany and then in France by the end of the 19th century, and we created Daimler and Benz of Germany and Otto and Levasseur of France, who was producing machines that gave us transportation without horses. By the beginning of the 20th century, Daimler produced the first modern automobile. They outfitted it with a 35 horsepower internal combustion engine that gave it a top speed of 50 plus miles an hour. This contrasted with the vehicle that Ransom Olds manufactured in America in 1901. That was a 3 horsepower machine. It was a tiller-steered vehicle instead of a wheel. It was superimposed on a buggy-like chassis. The Oldsmobile sold for $650 and was a success because it put it into the reach of the common man. The early 1904 model sold over 5,000 cars, and this was a record for production of a single model. The Duryea brothers of Springfield, Massachusetts designed the first American gasoline machine in 1893 and went on to win the first American car race in 1895. They manufactured the first American car to be sold in the United States in 1896. In 1899, there were 30 U.S. car makers producing about 2,500 vehicles. In the next 10 years, almost 500 car manufacturers started manufacturing all manner of self-propelled vehicles. The United States was a fertile sales area for cars. With an immense land area and a lot of isolated cities and towns, we had a great need for a transportation network. The administration in Washington also saw the need to unite the country and constructed and paved a series of roads that connected the isolated areas. Now, with better roads and need for better transportation, the automobile business prospered. Automobiles were here, but to the average wage earner, they were too expensive. Another change came when Henry Ford introduced his Model N in 1908. Here we had a 4-cylinder, 15-horsepower vehicle that sold for $600. Ford was able to produce 100 cars a day using new production techniques. Ford took advantage of standardizing parts that were interchangeable. This change was taking hold all over America. All types of manufacturers were making interchangeable parts. They could be made off-site and assembled in an assembly plant. This made better and cheaper manufactured products, and many manufacturers prospered as never before. Ford was so successful with their Model N that they started to design a new and better model, the Model T. They designed a 4-cylinder, 20-horsepower automobile with a planetary transmission. The price for the T was $825. Another great change occurred. The Model T was such a huge success that the Ford company was hard-pressed to keep up with the demand. Heretofore, the cars were assembled and placed with various mechanics, adding parts until the car was finished. This was time-consuming and inefficient. Ford instituted an entirely new concept in 1913, the moving assembly line. Now Model Ts rolled off the assembly line in great numbers. Manufacturers of all manner of goods quickly adopted this innovation, and also all the other automobile makers. In these years, there were more than 250 separate companies producing motor vehicles. The new production method was so efficient that Ford could lower the price of the car to $575. The success of Ford with the T was phenomenal. They continued to manufacture them until 1927, and when they finally stopped, the T was hopelessly and technically obsolete. In the last year of production, the T Coupe sold for $290. In all, they produced 15 plus million cars. In 1927, there was a glut of unsold cars on the market, as cars were mostly out of the reach of the working man, and the car owners were not buying replacement cars, as there was not much improvement year after year. Some car makers had tried to adopt installment sales earlier to compete with the low-priced Model T. Now there's a great push to sell cars on installment terms, and most cars were now bought on time. By 1929, the list of car makers was down to about 44, but the Great Depression winnowed the automobile manufacturers down to a manageable few. As most of the independents had been eliminated, the remaining companies were Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, Packard, Studebaker, Hudson, and Nash. America was starting to use electricity in a big way as modern engineering improved the rotating electric motor. All types of manufacturing were switching from the overhead power shaft and pulley system that was usually driven by the falling water sources obtained by industrial dams on local rivers. The huge mill buildings that were built next to the water power sources were now unnecessary and started to be abandoned. It was the start of another industrial change. Thomas Edison's invention of the incandescent lamp enabled the conversion of gas lines into electric wire conductors. The new power source was safer, brighter, and more efficient. Electricians of the day converted the gas pipes that were built into homes to carry gas into carriers for electric wires. They threaded wire into the old pipes and attached sockets to hold the new incandescent light. America was facing a new age, lights for everyone. Everyone who could be connected by copper wire. New factories were built in some of the old mill buildings to manufacture all types of newly needed items. The wire industry started to fill the huge demand for wire to electrify the homes. Incandescent bulb makers needed tungsten, so a new mining industry was started. Electromotors need insulation, copper, and steel. All kinds of new businesses began to fill the void for the new electric world. Although electricity was now available for street lighting, gas street lights were still being installed in the streets of Boston as late as 1948. I can remember the lamplighter in the early 30s. I lived in Mattapan as you did, but I don't remember the races that you're talking about. The lamplighter walked the street carrying a 10-foot ladder. He would climb up to the lamppost to service the gas light. Every week he would climb up and wind the clock mechanism and set it for the new time because of the changing sunrise and sunset. He'd set the time for off and on and then go on to the next lamppost. The ritual was a weekly happening as the clock mechanism needed a weekly winding. As much change came as a result of only one new invention, there were hundreds of new inventions being submitted to the patent office every day. The future was never brighter, but everything involved change. The United States concept of free education through the 12th grade started to make a huge difference. We had trade schools and apprentice programs. Everyone could get a high school education, and a large new group could go on to colleges and universities. This change allowed the U.S. to make a giant leap forward with general knowledge in the populace. I got to read that again. leap forward because of the new knowledge of the populace. Another invention of Tom Edison started a whole new industry. Although he did not invent film, he adapted film to be used in his motion picture camera. The invention of the motion picture camera and motion picture projector enabled artists and storytellers to make moving pictures. In the beginning, it was a novelty and an amazing trick, but eventually it was developed into an entertaining vehicle that involved the entire world. Theaters were built to show the silent movies, and the industry employed untold thousands of people. This change brought stage plays to people everywhere by this new medium. Early in the 20s, Westinghouse Electric and Bell Labs invented Vitaphone, a system where a phonograph record was synchronized with a motion picture to make sound. In 1927, Warner Brothers produced the first feature film to use this system, The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson. It was a huge success, and many films used this system. But another change was coming. Western Electric invented a system where the sound was superimposed onto the side of the film, and therefore it was completely synchronized, and that system is still being used today. At the same time period that Alexander Graham Bell was experimenting with sound transmission and Morse was perfecting his telegraph, Edison was also active in the same field. Edison was working on a device that could record Morse's telegraphic messages onto paper. His idea was to make indentations on paper tape, while experimenting, he ran his stylus across the tape and heard sounds, and further investigation culminated in recording a voice on a paper disc. The phonograph was born, another change, but there was nothing new, nothing that had preceded it. It was a new invention. Its first appearance was with a cone-shaped object covered with soft wax and acoustically activated stylus. As the cone rotated under the stylus, sound was recorded and you could play it back. Another change was coming, and an integrated system of electric microphones, amplifiers, and stylus recorders on wax. 10-inch records were then electroplated to make a pressing master, and then they were pressed onto shellac discs, which could be made from many, many pressings. This system started the phonograph record system that we use today. The system was adopted by many U.S. record labels. Sound recording now became an easy process. Sound could now be captured and pressed onto a disc. You could play it on your home phonograph. Before the phonograph, home music systems usually consisted of a player piano, a complicated piano that was expensive and large. It uses large rolls of punched paper tape that activated the piano keys by air pressure that was generated by a foot-controlled bellows. Today, some player pianos still exist. They have been converted to an electric bellows. The large piano rolls are still available for sale to player piano aficionados. Another change in recording was coming. CBS promoted the vinyl 12-inch recording disc, where a complete opera could be recorded on a single disc. The 12-inch disc was also allowed many popular songs to be recorded on a single disc. Not to be outdone, RCA invented the 45-speed record with a large spindle hole, and they introduced a very economical player to use these with their records. As all these systems competed with each other, another change was coming. Wire recording was the first magnetic recording device, invented before the turn of the century by a German inventor. During World War II, the Germans were in need of a recording device, and they perfected the wire recording machine to record all manner of messages. After the war, the Webster Electric Company and others furthered the development of the wire recorder and placed it on the market to instant success. Now, using a microphone, anybody could record music, a speech, or even a telephone conversation. The range of these recordings was limited, so another change was superseded. The wire recorder was superseded by the tape recorder. During the war, Jack Mullen, who was an engineer with the Signal Corps, discovered that tape recorders were in use in the German army. He acquired 2 machines from I.G. Farben Industries and reels of recording tape and had them shipped to his workshop at home. After he was discharged from the Army, he worked on improving the recording machines and set up a demonstration at MGM Studios in Hollywood. Bing Crosby saw the potential of Mullen's records and wanted to record his radio shows. Crosby invested money into the Ampex Corporation. Ampex, with Mullen as chief engineer, brought the machine to professional recording standards. Ampex and Mullen then developed commercial stereo and other recording machines. The change in recording of sound continued into the next phase. With the advent of the home computer in the 70s, digital recording became possible. In digital recording, both video and audio, a stream of numbers is generated, which then reconstituted by a computer returns the sound or video to its original form. By necessity, this is a rudimentary explanation of the entire process. Rest assured, it works seamlessly and can give you a perfect rendering of the original sound of video recording. Early in our country's progress, the general store carried all manner of necessary items: food, clothing, hardware, hay, grain, and meat. In the West, even prospective supplies were carried. Around the middle of the 19th century, there was a change. The grocery store was born. Food was by necessity produced very locally. The farmer on his horse and carriage brought farm goods to open market. And food shopping by necessity became a local thing. The open air market prevailed in every small hamlet and every neighborhood. Women could walk to the market and carry the food home. Some produce was shipped in by a railroad and allowed such things as oranges, lemons, and other fruits to be on the daily menu. The greengrocer, the grocer and tradesmen, tailors, locksmiths, cobblers, started to have storefronts in the local market area. The local peddler with his horse and wagon sold all kinds of products as he traveled from street to street. The store owner was now more mobile. He had a horse and wagon to get his wares from a central market, and soon wholesalers were delivering to him by early gasoline-powered vehicles. But another change was coming. The first self-service market probably started in Tennessee, where an enterprising grocer, Clarence Saunders, converted his grocery to self-service. His concept was to have a turnstile at the entrance to a large building. As the customer entered, she was in a single aisle that was wound through the store. On each side of the aisle, she could pick grocery items and place them into a wicker basket she carried. At the end of the aisle, there's a counter with a clerk and a cash register to tote up the groceries for payment. He named his store Piggly Wiggly, and it was a big success. As his concept caught on, he was able to sell franchises, and Piggly Wiggly stores were in almost every eastern state. He also began branding products under the Piggly Wiggly name, and his franchisees stocked their stores with his branded products. The great A&P, which had stores in Canada and the United States, was probably the largest chain store in the U.S. The A&P was a traditional grocery store where the goods were behind the counter and the purchaser indicated what he or she wanted to purchase. The grocery had assistant clerks who would weigh and measure all items were not prepackaged. If the purchased items were too heavy to carry, they used two-wheel carts and high school boys to deliver. Many a high schooler paid his way into college by working as a delivery boy for the local A&P grocer. The Piggly Wiggly concept was adopted by grocers everywhere, with each grocer adding something different. One enterprising grocer, after notifying that his customers usually stopped buying when their wicker basket became full, invented the shopping cart. The shopping cart allowed a customer to buy and fill the cart and bring it to a checkout counter. It was on wheels. This simple advance increased the profit of the self-service grocer. Although food stores now carry thousands of different items and carry much more than food, food is still the magnet that brings customers. Today, the grocery has changed into the supermarket. Supermarkets carry meat, produce, dairy, bakery goods, canned and packaged goods, household cleaning equipment. Some have alcohol and a pharmacy and even clothing. A visit to a supermarket can complete a whole week of shopping without going to another store. Every area of the country has their own chain market, but except for the discount stores, Target and Walmart, there is not one chain store grocery that is nationwide. The supermarket era began in 1930 and is still going strong. In the beginning of the 21st century, but it's still going strong into the beginning of the 21st century. But supermarket operators should not be complacent because change is coming. I remember when I was about 12 years old, my mother, who was working, asked me to go to the corner grocery store after school and buy a fresh seeded rye bread. The bakery delivered the fresh bread just about noon to the grocery. The grocery had two sizes of bread, a small one and a larger one. Our family consisted of 5 people, and we consumed one small bread every day. The price was 7 cents for the small and 11 cents for the larger one. The same small bread weighed exactly 1 pound, the same size that I buy today. In the intervening years, we've had what they call moderate inflation. The bread today costs $3.95. At the same time, a quart of milk was 11 cents, and the bottle of milk had the cream on the top. It was not homogenized. A little of the cream was diverted for the morning coffee for the adults, and the cream was shaken to distribute the rest of the cream for the morning cereal. Incidentally, we had a milkman that delivered the milk every day. I think we paid an extra penny per bottle for delivery. The milkman also had all types of dairy for delivery: butter, cream cheese, cottage cheese, and even fresh eggs. During this period, we had an ice box. It had a compartment for ice and another compartment for food with an air passageway that allowed the cool air to keep the food cold. Every day, the iceman would deliver a block of ice from his horse-drawn wagon or his newly acquired truck. He would get these huge blocks of ice from the local ice house or ice manufacturing plant. He would cut the ice in different sizes, and he supplied his customers with a 4-sided card that would be inserted in the kitchen window. The card contained 4 numbers, all on the outside perimeter, showing 15, 25, 50, and the word none. Whichever the size was needed exposed in the window, he would deliver in the house and collect the 15, 25, or 50 cents that needed for the ice. In the hot summer, his truck always had children looking for broken chips of ice to suck on. In the winter, we used less ice. We had a box mounted outside of the kitchen window in which we kept perishables that could stand the freezing winter weather. We did not have an electric refrigerator until after World War II. While I'm on the subject of the Iceman, in the winter, he used his truck to deliver coal to his coal customers. He went to the coal terminal and had the coal put up into 100-pound cloth reusable sacks. 20 sacks made a ton. He would then load up his truck with 20 or 40 sacks, deliver a ton or two to your local coal chute. It was an arduous job carrying these heavy sacks on his back. Coal was also delivered by a dedicated coal truck, which had a lift so the coal would slide out of the truck onto a chute directly into your basement. There were different types of coal and different sizes of a piece of coal, and they delivered to the customer's preference. Also in great popularity, there was coke, which was a byproduct of the production of coal gas. Although coke was a much cheaper product, it did not contain as much heat when burned as anthracite coal. Homes were heated by boilers in the basement that manufactured steam and or hot water to radiators distributed throughout the house. In order to keep the house warm in the dead of winter, the furnace had to be attended to twice a day. The burned ash had to be removed from the boiler or furnace and fresh coal or coke added to the fire. When the ash was removed by shaking the grate, it was shoveled into a barrel that was collected by the municipality's truck on a weekly basis. The cheapest heating system was hot air, where the air heated in the furnace was delivered through ducts to each room. Incidentally, this system is very popular today because it allows air conditioning system to distribute the refrigerated air as well as heat in the winter. The question always arises, how come more women were not in the labor force in these years? Well, it was a time of hardship to be a wife and mother. As an example, in the kitchen of every house there was a black cast iron stove. It had really 3 purposes. It was fueled by nut coal that we bought in 25 and 50-pound bags at the grocery. It was used as the heating element in the stove. And in the oven, it was always hot. On top of the firebox, there was metal plates that we could get hot so that the pots could be used to cook and prepare food. And the stove also heated the kitchen and sometimes a couple of other rooms when the weather was not too cold in the fall. Sometime in the 30s, there was a change. The firebox could be converted to a simple range oil burner by the local plumber. He removed the fire grate and installed the oil burner. This necessitated a 55-gallon drum of range oil in the cellar, and the older children would go down to the cellar and fill the oil container at least once a day. The housewife also had to wash the clothes in a sink using a scrubbing board to get all the stains out, and after that she would take the wet clothes to the outside and hang them on a clothesline to dry. When dry, the clothes needed ironing and hanging up. Along with the cooking and baking, shopping for groceries at the local grocery, she had to walk to as many as she had no car, nor a driver's license if the family did have a car. With all the foregoing, plus keeping the house and children clean, all adding up to a busy life, it's no wonder that they were unable to go out to work. Most women who worked were young and single. They worked in offices as typists, bookkeepers, and many more were teachers in the public schools. As we discussed previously, heating in the winter brought serious challenges to the household. When the weather became really cold in December through early March, the kitchen stove was inadequate to heat the whole house. The coal burning furnace or boiler in the cellar was the difficult. So here we really needed a change. Enterprising companies developed oil burner conversions for the home heating equipment. An entire industry was born. There were two types of conversion furnace boilers developed. One was a gun-type burner that required an electric motor to supply a mist of oil through a nozzle into the firebox that formerly was heated by the coal fire. The other type was a gravity-feed oil burner that had a pool of oil burning on a flat pan-type burner mounted in the firebox. Both systems were ignited by an electric spark. Although the gravity-feed system was cheaper to manufacture, due to the service requirements and reliability of the burner, the gun-type burner was the one that eventually was adopted. A new type of technician was needed, an oil burner technician. In the 30s and 40s, these technicians converted old coal-burning fireboxes into modern oil burners. The oil burner was controlled by an electronic thermostat mounted in the suitor room in the house and adjustable by a resident for whatever temperature was required. Now we had oil delivery companies, oil distribution depots, and oil tankers and oil pipelines to get the oil where it was needed. Thousands of jobs were created for this new industry at the expense of the coal industry. Is everybody happy?
How are you holding up?
I'm holding up fine. You know,
We got you some extra water here.
I see that. Thank you. You know, I had a problem a couple of weeks ago with my eye. So I woke up one morning and I had a film over my right eye, and I went to see the doctor right away, and they didn't know what it was immediately, and they suggested that I wait a month to see what happens. And as it turns out, it has holes. It's like a fabric with holes and solid areas, and it floats around my eye. When the hole is in front of my optic nerve, I can see everything fine. But when the solid part moves in front of it, I can't see anything at all. And it's in the fluid itself. It's like the fluid moves around. So I'm having an operation next Thursday to try to drain the liquid out of the eye and put fresh liquid in, and hopefully that will cure it if it doesn't come back again, of course. So that's why this is not because of Halloween.
Question, where are you in your presentation?
Time is starting to be a factor.
I have had a wonderful opportunity to read Al's book, and it's just amazing what you've not only recalled, but what you're, and so I asked Al, about, a week ago, I don't know, after having read it, how you're going to condense everything that you've written in this book. And I now have the answer. He's not condensing it, he's sharing the whole thing.
No.
But the question is, and it's an incredible book, and your experience and your recall, and once again, this guy is known for setting records. We have never had anybody who has been able to share 20,000 words within a 25-minute period. And so my question is, the degree, I know what you've got left to cover.
Yeah, well,
And the question is whether.
I only have as much to cover as you guys will let me do.
I'd like to suggest that we move to your World War II experiences. We're here to celebrate Veterans Day, and I think if we could do that, that'd be.
Well, I'll tell the story about one of my missions. I would like to tell one more story here.
Okay.
One more story, and then we'll go on to one of these World War II missions. We were lucky during the Depression. My dad earned $20 a week working in a bedding factory. A relative of ours owned the factory, and when Dad lost his job as a meat cutter, he employed him so that the family would survive. But there was a change coming. The employees of the factory went on strike for better wages. My dad could not go on strike against the relative who gave him a job when he was unemployed. He was between a rock and a hard place. The union won the strike, but as they declared it a closed shop and my dad was not a union member, he could not work. There was much turmoil in the workplace about this. Eventually, the union let my dad join because the owner of the factory said that he will close the factory down if they insist that my father can't work there. So anyway, eventually the union let my dad join, but they fined him $100. And for that $100 was $2 a week. $2 a week. I went with my dad every Saturday. We would drive to the north end of Boston from Dorchester or Mattapan, so he could pay them the $2. And this went on for a whole year, 50 weeks, $2 a week for $100. I remember accompanying Dad every week for a year, driving to the north end of Boston. After the first strike, 2 years later, the union did it again. A new strike, and Dad was in a hard place again. Now he was expected to go out on strike as he was a union member. He never questioned his decision. He could not go against his benefactor who gave him a job in the worst days. So the only decision was to quit. In 1936, we were without money and without a job. Things looked bad. Mom asked two of her sisters if they could possibly lend us $150 each. And Dad asked his sister if she would also kick in with $150. With this money of $450, they purchased a small, failing mom-and-pop variety store. The idea was to build up the store. Mom would work there, I would work there, my brother would work there, and after it was on a paying basis, Dad would look for a job elsewhere, and we would have two incomes. In the beginning, it was touch and go. The saving grace was that at least we had food from the store. As Dad was fixing up and cleaning up the store, he discovered that it had once been a smoke shop, and he found a closet full of smokers' briars pipes. When the pipes were inventoried, they were worth about $1,000. A windfall for us, as he arranged to sell them to another smoke shop. With the money from the pipes, he renewed and freshened the store and was able to stock it with goods. One of the benefits of the store for me was the magazine rack. Monthly magazines would be put on display, and if they did not sell, they returned to the distributor. This was an automatic process. The distributor salesman would come twice a week, check on the sales, and remove old issues and place them with the current issue. That meant that I could take an issue home, read it, and then return it to the rack. I was a vociferous reader, and I had varied interests. Science magazines, mechanical magazines, flight magazines, do-it-yourself magazines. By the time I was 16, I knew how almost everything worked, how to analyze and repair almost everything. I fixed toasters, hair dryers, switches, and almost everything that would break down. Neighbors were always bringing me something to fix for them. Best of all, I really enjoyed doing the repair. There was something about instant satisfaction when you fix things with your hands. That's the story that I tell. I was not very happy with unions all my life, but because of this particular episode, because I thought that they were being very unfair the way my father was handled. But I've changed my attitude now. Now I'm for unions. Like everything else, you change. Even I change as you go along. Okay, now I'm going to relate to you the story of one of my missions. I was a navigator in the B-17. And as you know, the 8th Air Force was based in England, flying over Germany, and bombing Germany, and returning back to England after the bombing cruise. We used to get up in the morning, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd go to mess, go to briefing, and go out to the line to take off with our airport, and it was still dark. We would take off in the dark of the night. On one particular mission, we were heading for, I think it was Munich, that we were going to bomb a factory just on the outside of Munich. And it was a very bad day. It was the kind of day that even the birds didn't fly. But we were up there trying to get there. And as we assembled the plane with the other planes, we put together 36 planes in our group. And we slowly headed for the coast. We went over the coast of Holland. We went into Germany on that area, and we were heading for Munich. And about halfway there, we got a notification that Munich was socked in completely. It was a very bad day. It was socked in completely. And because there was a prisoner of war camp right near the factory that we were supposed to bomb, they said we couldn't take a chance in trying to bomb the factory because we might hit the prisoner of war camp. So they gave us what they call a secondary target. Well, I sat down with my desk, and I was the navigator, and we turned the group around, and we started heading for the secondary target, which is about 60 miles north of Munich. And about 8 minutes after we were set on the way to the secondary target, we got another message saying that the whole of Western Germany was socked in, and we would have to find a target of opportunity to drop our bombs because we couldn't bomb it at the second target either. Well, you know, you can't bring your bombs back home because you can't land with bombs. They'll explode on you as you hit the ground. So you either dump them in the ocean as you on the way home, or you find a target that you think that would be beneficial to the war if you could find one on the way home. Well, naturally, when this message came through, I decided that we're not going to find a target of opportunity further west in Germany. We're going to turn back east. So we turned the whole group around, and we started heading home, hoping that we'd find an opportunity on the way home. Now, we were flying with 3 groups. That's 36 planes in each group. It was the 384th group that I was in, the 379th group, and the 303rd group. We were a wing of the Air Force, and we were all flying together. And as it happened on this particular day, we were the lead group, and I was one of the lead navigators. And whenever we made a turn to the left, or they made a turn to the left, all 108 planes went to wherever we went. So all of a sudden, my bombardier, who was looking for a target of opportunity through the nose of the thing, says he saw some smoke. Well, what do you do when you see smoke on the enemy coming up through the clouds? So we sent one of the planes ahead to see if he could go underneath the cloud cover, go down low. We were about 26,000 feet. We sent him down to about 20,000. Maybe he could get under the cloud cover and find out what this target was. Well, he went under the cloud cover and radioed back to us that it was a factory sitting in an area, and the smoke was coming out of its chimney. Well, that's good enough for us. Whatever it is, a target of opportunity. If it's a factory in Germany, it's producing something, and we're going to bomb it. And we set up everything. The bombardier sets up his bomb site, and we open the door, the door to the bomb bay, and make a run at this target and drop the bomb on this target. Now, we don't know what we've hit. We know the bombs are gone, and we're on our way home. We don't know what we've hit. But we always, after bombs are away, you always send a hot camera plane back. The hot camera plane burns out their engines and actually get back before you get back, so that the what do you call it?
Intelligence.
The wizards who know what's going on in the world. They develop the films for us, and they know exactly what target we've hit. And we don't know what target we've hit until we get in the ground. We get in the ground, we go into briefing, and they tell us we were lucky. We hit a factory that was a shoe factory. Now, if you go and look at the newsreels of World War II, from that date on, you'll see that the Germans don't have any more shoes. They're using rags on their feet to do it. So you can say that I won the war.
That's a great one. Oh, my Lord.
We have questions, Fred.
Good job, Al. That was wonderful.
Yes.
Any questions at all?
Any questions? I have all kinds of questions. I have all kinds of answers.
I like that. I've got the answers if you've got the questions.
Right.
I was gonna say, you talked a lot about the heating systems in houses.
Yeah.
The first house I bought was in West Hartford, Connecticut, and it was built in the late 20s. And of course, basically, the original heating system there was coal.
It's cold, yeah.
Yeah, it was coal with hot water.
Hot water cold.
Yep.
Radiators.
Yep. Anyway, so, you know, when I got in there, of course, they were using oil.
By the time you got there.
I moved in around 1977 or thereabouts, and of
Oh,
course,
yeah,
they've
wow.
long since
Yeah.
gone to oil, but I converted it to gas. That's the whole point. That's the progression, really, is from coal to oil to gas. So, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I'm still using the same boiler.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was kind of, that I'll never forget about the house is that the hot water heater. The hot water heater that I had in that house, when I bought it in 1977, was approximately 50 years old. It had the copper you know,
Yeah.
in other words, belly to it, in other words, you know, the, not the boiler, but, you know, in other words, the boiler was copper. So that in effect, that thing could last pretty much forever.
Yeah, well,
Now, in contrast, I moved into Jamaica Plain, and in 17 years, I was on my fourth hot water heater. I mean, look at the contrast. They don't make them like they used to.
no, they don't make it, they don't make it.
Well, everything is made today.
No, they make them steel now, and they coat them with fiberglass inside, so the water doesn't get at the steel. Hopefully, but the fiberglass breaks down, and the water gets at the steel, and it starts to rust, and that's the end of them.
Well, these hot water heaters today only last for like 7 or 8 years, that's it.
Yeah.
This thing lasted 50. Look at the contrast.
Well, you know, there's also another thing. When they had these boilers in the cellar, they had an attachment to it that gave you hot water in the wintertime. When the boiler was on, it automatically had a coil inside the burner that kept giving you hot water for your domestic hot water service. So you didn't have to run a separate water heater. And this was like, it was free energy, free hot water for you all winter long.
Anyway, point of the matter is that it's amazing to me that, in other words, they used to make some things that would last for a long, long time. Now, in other words, the appliance companies, in other words, the hot water heater, everything is made to be throwaway so that they can keep selling more and more of this stuff.
They know exactly what to do.
Obsolescence.
It's throwaway.
Planned
Everything's throwaway today. Nothing's really built on.
You know,
So everybody at work.
it's self doing it. The items are bad, so they break down. So you have to buy new ones. But there's another thing that I was very upset about. In the beginning with computers, you bought a computer program, and you could use the computer program forever. All of a sudden, they put what they called sunset on the program. You would buy the program, and 3 years later, it would automatically stop working. You had to buy another one. I thought that was pretty bad, and that's what they do today. They have sunset built into the program itself.
Well, actually, I'm a software developer.
Yeah.
You know, and what they're doing is, for instance, I worked on Oracle.
Yeah.
And essentially what Oracle does is after some period of time, a fairly long period of time, like 7 or 8 years, the Oracle, you know, this database system that you bought 8 years ago, they no longer support.
Yeah, right.
That's really what they do. You can keep using it.
Yeah, well, no, a lot of them you can't use. I had a bookkeeping program from the great bookkeeping company, and you can't use it anymore. No, you just can't use it. It stops working.
Really?
Yeah,
I've
it
never
stops
seen
working.
that.
But I beat them though. I set my calendar in the computer back 2 years, and now it works again.
I've never heard of software stop working.
Yeah.
I mean, the point of the matter is they stop supporting it. That's really.
Yeah.
When I say Oracle, I'm not talking about something else.
Well, they all do. They all stop supporting it. Windows 7 is not supported anymore. Windows 10 has about another year to go before they'll stop it. So.
Excuse me, do we have other questions before we wrap up our program?
Just a comment, Al.
Yeah.
At one time, I had a photograph of my father in the left seat of a B-17, and in the right seat was Bob Hope.
Wow.
That's great. That's great. Your father was a pilot?
He was actually attached to the 129th Air Ferrying Command.
Yeah.
He wrote for Stars and Stripes.
Yeah.
But he did one day, out of whatever reason, he did fly the Dresden raid.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, great program.